conversation about Africa is always very, very sensitive and very, how do I put it? Very interesting in many ways, because this is one of the fast growing and youngest continents alive right now. And we're expecting this to be happening and to be the same story in the next 20, 50 years to come, especially for instance, in a place like Tanzania, the median age is 18. So you're expecting these people to be young in the next, I don't know, 30 years. So yeah, it's quite an interesting journey if we do not, if we talk about the development of the rest of the world without talking about the development of Africa. But anyway, we were having this conversation when we were catching up about what is really the promise of after to Africa. Now, before we go all down and have to start that conversation, which is already started to be very interesting conversation, by the way, I would really love for every speaker to just introduce themselves and say what they do exactly, and then we go down from there. Ms. Tiekie, can we start with you?
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody on our side of the world. It is 9:04 in the morning in South Africa, and really, really grateful to be here and very honored with all my other panelists and with Vanessa. So I represent the Shared Value Africa Initiative. We are a Pan-African organization, and we advocate for the implementation and adoption of a new business system and strategy, one of creating shared value. We believe that in order to accelerate economic growth and contribute to the success of the AfCFTA and growing intra-Africa trade, we as business need to profitably address material, social, and environmental issues. What we've seen during COVID as well is that what has been demonstrated is how inextricably linked the business and society is, and the one cannot operate without the other. So we, as the Shared Value Africa Initiative, work extensively with SMEs on the Africa continent through our African Entrepreneurship Forum. You know, we've looked at the AfCFTA, we've looked at what the AfCFTA is trying to achieve. It's been in operation for a year now. We've sat with young entrepreneurs, we've done research to see what their knowledge are of the AfCFTA. And as Vanessa said, when we were talking about it, there's huge, information gaps from an Africa continental free trade area perspective. So the shared value business management concept expects business and government, both of them, to consciously and intentionally create policies and practices that will not only benefit big business and government, but also the smaller businesses and also the communities in which these businesses operate. So thus creating economic value and value for our people and the environment. So the shared value business management concept comes from Harvard Business School. It was created by Professor Michael Porter and Mark Kramer, who looked at corporate social investment and looked at corporate social responsibility and realized that business has a much bigger responsibility than just corporate social investment and corporate social responsibility. And that's where the shared value business management concept came from. And in closing, Vanessa, I just want to say that we believe very strongly that we need a new system and we need new strategies, and that the answer to that is creating shared value. Thank you.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Ms. Tiekie. Justin, tell us a little bit about you. What do you do?
Vanessa or Nessa, the name is Justice. It's a common name, right? It's not Justin, it's Justice. So,
forgive me.
As in freedom and justice.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So I'm the managing director of Sikadine Homes, and what we're trying to do is to provide social housing for the low-income population in Ghana, or probably globally. In a bigger perspective, it will be in Africa. but we're starting in Ghana. So we are in our first phase. The first phase is to provide the rental services and home ownership policy for people to, one, rent and pay monthly in Ghana. You know that tenants need to raise 1 year or 2 year advance before you can occupy a room that is not yours, which is making rent more expensive and not affordable, because anytime you spend more than 30% of your income on rent, it doesn't make it affordable. So we are developing policies that will make rent out more affordable for the low income. We are also developing home ownership scheme for people to own their houses. So that is the first phase of Sikadine Homes. The second phase has to deal with reconstructing affordable homes for people to easily rent and own it in a more, let me say, flexible within their financial strength, right? So currently we're focusing on our first phase. Very soon we will switch to the second phase. Sikadine is just a local dialect that simply means a house full of money. So
wow.
Sika is money, and Dan is house. So Sikadine home. So money full of. I also double up as a executive director of African Entrepreneurship Dialogue. We have been in the system since 2017. What we're trying to do with the African Entrepreneurship Dialogue, we represent the entrepreneurial ecosystem, especially the startup, as the think tank driving policies or advocacy that really the startup really need. So we are famous for initiating the Ghana Startup Act. So if you read about the Ghana Startup Act, you realize that the African Entrepreneurship Dialogue actually initiated their launch in 2018 at British Council in Ghana. So this is what we're trying to do. Currently, we are conducting a survey within the entrepreneur ecosystem. That will be published next year. So that's what I can say about myself and what I've been doing in Ghana as well.
Thank you very much, Justice. So, Mr. Guillermo, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. So happy to be part of this meeting. Also to my fellow speakers. My name is Guilermo. I work for Coltiva. We are an Indonesian company with headquarters in Switzerland. We provide end-to-end agricultural solutions, holistic solution from seed to table for all agricultural and non-agricultural commodities. We bring value upstream via finance, farmer knowledge, data, certification, traceability, digital B2C sales, agri-input, etc. So we create complete solutions for our clients. Our clients include multinational corporations, food multinational corporations, tire manufacturers, traders, exporters, all the way to small farmers, buying stations, etc. We have been working with projects in Ivory Coast mainly, but also in Madagascar, in Mali, Uganda, Morocco, Tunisia, South Africa, and we have project proposals all over Africa. Previously, I used to work in agricultural commodities too, mainly cocoa and coffee. So I have been exposed to both working on the field in Africa, as well as working with data or values of outputs coming from Africa.
That's very interesting. So before I go back to our discussion that we were having earlier, I'm just going to start with where you ended. Africa, in many of African countries, are actually so much dependent on agriculture. But also many of African countries have not been able to take advantage of the export market to actually grow their economy. Especially it doesn't work so well with the peasants, like the small farmers who directly are the ones involved in this work. How do you see the implications of AfCFTA in changing all of this system, and what do you think may need to be done, given that you've had the experience on ground and working at the high level point of view? What do you think needs to be done? What kind of systems do you think need to be created that can favor small businesses and small farmers in the agriculture sector in most of African countries to actually benefit with the change and the future that is coming?
Yeah, I think the AfCFTA is a great and fantastic idea. I think that follows the model implemented in other regions globally for better trade, for faster clearance of goods. This definitely will help, especially the landlocked countries in Africa. And if you look at the data, many of these commodities are produced in Africa, exported to the Middle East or Europe for processing, and then shipped back to Africa. So this model is not very beneficial. It's not very environmentally conscious. And is, I guess, the first step that we can take is industrializing these parts of Africa to process these commodities. So both the commodities and the processing can be done within Africa. So I think that's a part where the AfCFTA can work together within governments and SMEs. So governments can really create the ideal situation for these companies to settle within Africa, so they don't have to ship these goods back and forth for the African population.
That's very interesting, because there was a time I was in there for work, and we had this kind of similar discussion, because there are farmers that produce cocoa and it goes out and it's processed and chocolates come back in, and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. But then so there's a kind of really conversation that we need to have if we're going to have to create a structure that can benefit especially SMEs. That being said, Justice, you have run business in Ghana, and you're championing a good environment for startups in Ghana, and probably you've engaged a lot with other entrepreneurs across Africa. First, my question would be to you. Do you really think we need to invest in startups, or we need to invest in SMEs for like the most effective and the most immediate economic development of Africa? Do we need to invest in startups, or do we need to invest in SMEs, who until now seem to be the backbone of the economy of Africa?
Yes, so I'll answer your question in so many angles. It's just a phase of a business. So an SME can even be in a startup phase. So we have to clarify it well. Yes, in 10 years' time, we should ask ourselves, what are the giant enterprise Africa is going to produce if these large companies are no more? So it definitely informs that there must be a conscious effort to invest into infrastructure, into startups, right? So if you don't invest into startup, what you are telling yourself that in 50 years, 30 years, 20 years to come, there's not going to be a production, or there's not going to be a future in terms of production of services, goods and services, right? So there is a need for us to make investments, target investment, tailored investment, not any donation or grants. It has to be targeted. So these are my concerns, right? Regards to the African continental free trade, is it going to be a good deal for SMEs and startups? Yes, it's going to be a good deal for SMEs and startups. Is it going to be a good deal for African countries? Yes. But you know what? The countries that have the right market strategy or export strategy policies are going to enjoy most, right? So it's going to bring more competition within the market, because we are creating a single market. There's no Ghanaian market anymore. There's no Nigerian market anymore. They're all coming together as one. And there is this kind of trade liberation. So any big business in South Africa can invade the market of Ghana without any barriers. So if it has the capacity to outperform you, it can even fold you or take you out of business. So my problem is that leaders within African countries must begin to strategize, must have two important things. I think number one have to be the export strategy of a country, and then the entry market strategy of a country. A country that has a proper entry strategy, market strategy, and a proper export strategy is going to reflect in the approach of its SMEs and startups. So if South Africa or maybe Nigeria or Kenya has a better one than Ghana, definitely the SMEs in Ghana are going to struggle to compete within the market space, right? So I heard one point making that SMEs and startups can really not compete with bigger companies when it comes to trade, or because the biggest enterprise have the resources to actually scale up or expand or actually outperform any company and stuff. So what the SMEs need is not just the legal framework that the AfCFTA comes with, but capacity building, trade finance support for SMEs and startups, right? And as we go along, I'll share more thoughts, because if you look at the statistic that was even captured in the playbook, you realize that Africa is the largest in the continent, the second largest in the continent after Asia. But when you look at our trade performance, right? Let me rephrase, only 2%, we contribute to only 2% of global trade. That is not impressive. And out of this 2%, only 17% of African export are intra, right? What it means is that we consume a lot of import of foreign goods and services. And these are the things the leaders have to look at. What are the ways we can leverage on this AfCFTA to improve productivity? And industrialization is one, investing in industrialization so that you have a limited goods and services you consume. You export more than you import. So why is Africa the second largest? But when it comes to economic development and poverty performance, we are not doing well. It's because we are not performing well in trade. We consume absolutely everything that we eat, everything that we need in our country. So these are the highlight I will make on the African free trade area.
Wow, this is massive contribution that I'm getting from you, Justin, from Guilermo, from creating systems that can benefit the small entrepreneurs and the farmers that are in the agriculture sectors in Africa, but also creating an environment where the SMEs can actually have a competitive advantage, and the startups in Africa can have a competitive advantage in to be able to benefit within the AfCFTA and to actually contribute in the development of the African continent generally. Now, I would go to you, Ms. Tiekie. It's that you have been working with SMEs, but also you involve yourselves so much in areas of policies, if I've understood correctly. Do you think business decisions generally, which in many cases, I'm choosing to see that way, in many cases, sort of decide the economic situation of the country? Do you really think business decisions and agendas in Africa, after your experiences working with SMEs and regulated bodies, are driven by businesses or governments? And who do you think should be driving the agenda in the first place?
I think, thanks, Vanessa. And, I just want to say to Justice and Guillermo, I don't know if I pronounced your name right, Guillermo. I do agree with you that industrialization and processing, as you said, from an agricultural perspective in Africa is really something that we need to look at. But just to take a step back, in Africa, SMEs provide an estimated 80% of jobs across the continent. representing an important driver of economic growth. So sub-Saharan Africa alone has 44 million micro, small and medium enterprises, almost all of which are micro, as we know. So for these businesses to grow, create more jobs and generate economic growth, they need access to capital, as Justice was saying as well. And we're not talking about grants here, and there's so many, we require funding so that, and it's difficult for them to access funding at the moment. So credit constraints are seriously challenging SMEs at the moment. And without reliable sources, as Justice alluded to, it's very difficult for our SMEs to actually expand, to cross borders, to break down barriers, and we really, really need to look at that. Now, whose responsibility is this? Is this business or is it government? It's our collective responsibility. We together have to create, as we all say, that Africa that we want. So business has to step up, very, very much so. And so does governments have to step up as well. And if we're looking at the smaller micro enterprises, we need to capacitate them, because we cannot leave it just to big businesses. And I think I often, when you talk to big businesses as well, is that they have the power and they have the resources to actually help our SMEs and to assist our SMEs to become part even of their supply chain in order to create those exports, that we want to create in order to create a more successful AfCFTA. But unless we support our SMEs, I really want to stress it today, and I think, it is, we've seen it, and I know that AfCFTA has been running for a year, and we have this really beautiful picture, and this vision that is really going to be a game changer for Africa. But we really need governments and big business need to support our SMEs and on this journey, to creating more prosperity for all on the Africa continent.
I love that. The conversation of industrialization and the conversation of investment is a very interesting conversation that has been happening here in Tanzania also for a couple of years now. I love the point of grants because we have a vocabulary in Tanzania called grantpreneurs. These are entrepreneurs who function or sort of sustain themselves through grants, and the challenge that is, it doesn't necessarily guarantee them growth because grant is limited, is narrow focused, is channeled. There's a lot of all of that. Before I go to, want us to convert to have a conversation about investment and what do we think is like an important investment around that. I am going to ask Guillermo first, and then we have a couple of questions at the chat, but I'm going to ask Guillermo first, having that you have worked within Africa and outside of Africa. Do you think in any way if the growth of after, like the success of after, will change the relationship, especially the economic relationship between Africa and the rest of the world, and between Africa and other African countries? I mean, between African countries themselves. Do you think it will change in any way? And what kind of change do you see if it's a yes?
Yes, thank you. I think that I wanted to bring an example because we talk about free trade here, how basically the paradigm is changing globally. Recently, Indonesia has signed a free trade agreement with Switzerland, in which one of the clauses was to establish sustainability standards for palm oil exported from Indonesia to Switzerland. So I think
Wow.
this is an interesting model of development for Africa with the rest of the globe. It's kind of a trade-off in which open to sign free trade agreements in exchange of building sustainability products instead of building development, instead of building capabilities for the local population. So drawing upon that, I definitely see that in this post-COVID world, we're definitely going to see more integration with Africa with the rest of the world, not only through free trade, but also manpower, also startups, native startups coming from Africa, like what we have seen in the past 10, 20 years with technology coming from China, India, Indonesia, with their own localized solution startups, right? And within Africa, I see cooperation between countries, perhaps to have a more solid export strategy, like Justice was mentioning before. I think that a lot of the African countries are producing similar products, similar exportable goods. And I think moving forward to make it more competitive, they will need to segment a bit more and dynamize their economy by relying less on a handful of products.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting take. Maybe for sure, we may need to sit each African countries and sort of figure out what is the one product within, or maybe a couple of products within a country that can be able to sort of sell more, and they can be able to complement the markets in different other African markets, and can be able to exchange and trade with other African countries. And that's going to be very interesting, because the conversation on are SMEs, African SMEs, competitive enough to be able to benefit, or to be able, even we've talked a lot about benefiting, to be able to actually cater the environment that will be brought by the free trade. That's a whole different conversation, because there are some countries, in a way, because of the environment that is there, maybe the systems and the regulation systems that are already existing seem to sort of have an upper hand. The availability of investment compared to other countries seem to already give them upper hand in terms of being competitive within the African market. For instance, Kenya, Egypt, South Africa, Morocco. But I'm curious to know, how do we create an environment that is going to, how do we help the SMEs in different countries be competitive enough to survive and grow within the region, within Africa and globally, but at the same time to complement each other within Africa, because you want them to work together other than sort of kill each other's markets. So that's kind of a very, that's kind of a very interesting environment that I would wish to know. What do you guys think? Maybe Justice, we start with you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't get the full question, but I'll try and answer it. Let
me summarize it.
Okay.
Let me just summarize it. How do we create a competitive, how do we create African SMEs and startups to be competitive enough to survive and be able to not just profit, but to be able to cater the new systems and the future that is brought by the free trade, without them necessarily killing each other's markets? Because if Kenyan SMEs or startups already have a higher sort of advantage in terms of competitiveness, access of investment, and all of that over Tanzanian SMEs, I'm not seeing how they sort of complement each other. I'm seeing them anyway, I'm seeing them killing each other.
I get it now.
So yes, so like, how do you see that work?
It's that there are obstacles to the continent integration when it comes to the African continental free trade. There are going to be obstacles. For instance, governments or countries are not going to be happy because their tariffs are going to be removed because those barriers are going to be removed. So duties that you pay when you are importing something into the country, either it's going to be reduced or it's going to be eliminated. I mean, these are obstacles or challenges that government are looking at. The second thing you also have to think of is the fairness in trade. I mean, every country within the 55 member state of the African Continental Free Trade has its strength, has its strength in terms of what they can produce, resources in terms of finance and natural resources and stuff. So these are things they are looking at, so that the implementation of these doesn't create a lot of unfairness that will put off a lot of members not to sign, because currently 54 out of 55 have signed, but only 33 has ratified, right? It means they have major concern when it comes to these issues, right? But my suggestion in terms of solutions would be that there needs to be a proper, as I already made, export strategy and policies, right? Your country needs to position itself very well, because once this is done, it is up for a country to take the opportunity, right? You want it, you sign it, you ratify it. So what implication it comes with? You should be ready to strategize yourself and take advantage of opportunity. So every country, and I know most of the countries have begun to develop a tailored export strategy and policies that will help their SMEs, that will help their startups, and that will even further help their large enterprises. Again, there must be an entry plan, an entry strategy. Even with the SMEs or a company, when you are entering into a market, you need a strategy. The same way as a nation or as a country, you also need to position yourself in a way that your country have a posture in terms of market entry. So my solution will be that there must be standardization within the African continental free zone. So let me give you a typical example. Let's assume that Ghana produces cocoa and cannot process it into fine product for people to consume. So it does what? It exports it to another country. One of the major challenges that were identified when drafting the FCFTA is that African doesn't do more businesses among themselves, right? They are either are consuming imports or they're exporting few to other countries, right? So there must be strategic alliance among themselves. So Ghana and Nigeria, okay, Nigeria can have the infrastructure to process cocoa and into chocolate and other products. So there must be a strategic alliance between Ghana and Nigeria in terms of cocoa. Maybe in Kenya and another country. So my focus is that there is no need for this if Africa is going to consume foreign products. Again, there is no need for that. So how do we change that? How do we change that is not a document implementation. It is a strategic position, a conscious effort to say that Africa is going to consume what they produce. So let us standardize our policies among ourselves. Let's trade among ourselves. Let's know what we are exporting outside and what we are importing inside. Let's have a very look at Europe and Asia. Asia is doing well when it comes to intracontinental trade. They are doing 59%. Europe is doing 58%. Africa is doing 17%. Right. So a conscious effort but we are the second largest. We have the population, we have the market. So we have, the leaders have to, you have to have a conscious position that, look, these are the things we want to trade with other continents. These are the things we want to produce and export to other continents. And these are the things, these are the standardization we want to have within the countries among the what I call the free trade zone. And these are the approaches. And lastly, if you don't have proper infrastructure for the startup and SMEs, forget it. It's just going to be the same story. The big companies are going to marshal out the small business. Look, in Ghana, the SMEs and startups are paying the same amount of fees if you want to register your product at FDA or Ghana Standard Authority so that your product can be recognized on the international market. They are paying the same fee just as that of the large businesses. These are barriers that we need to eliminate with policies, with export strategies. It must be conscious. Other than that, it's just going to be another document, because this is not the first trade deal document that we have in Africa. There have been a lot of it. So I have an article I'll share. I actually highlighted 3 things. One have to be a common currency, right? So we've heard about ECO. So the problem is that in Ghana, we have so many regions. Imagine that if I'm trading within inter-towns within Ghana and I'm using different currency, just imagine the transfer cost is going to have. So once we have a common currency that we can use to trade when it comes to our single market, it's going to solve a lot of problems for both the SMEs and the bigger companies, right? So the second thing I have to do with the free movement. Free movement, if I can travel to other African countries and stay up to 6 months without any requirements, any restrictions, it will enable me to actually transact business, enable me to do surveys or research to expand my businesses. These are things we need to look out for. And whilst we're doing that, we don't always have to forget the SMEs and the startups, because the SMEs and the startups are the future of the single market we're creating. These big companies at the time will exit, will fade out. But what is the future of African trade market? Is the startups you see today, is the SMEs you see today. That is our future. So a specialized trade finance or funds that will be dedicated to support SMEs and startups to also build their capacity, muzzle resources to expand production and to compete. You see small businesses in Asia exporting a lot of goods and services to other continents. You'll be surprised, but a whole African continent cannot even compete with just a small businesses in Europe or probably in Asia. So these are the things I want to see, and I want to see the leaders who have a conscious effort. Other than that, we are just drafting another fine document that will be archived for nothing. Same story, no impact, nothing changes.
Thank you very much, Justice. I love first, I love with the passion in which you speak about this. It actually shows you're truly an African entrepreneur, because you're like, hey, this needs to be done. So I love that. I truly love it. But also I love some of the conversations about the environment in which Africa needs to create for themselves. I'm just curious, does that mean Ghana and Nigeria will stop fighting over jollof, and Kenya and Tanzania over Kilimanjaro?
Look, and surprisingly, you see that Nigeria does not consume foreign rice. You know that? No, Nigeria do not import foreign rice, so they eat their local rice.
That's interesting.
The narrative is different in Ghana. Yes, the narrative is different in Ghana. So the conscious effort to say that we will not allow importation of local rice, what is it going to do? It's going to force the local farmers to expand, knowing that when they produce, there's a ready market to consume. These are the conscious efforts we are looking out for, right? But the mixed feeling is that in Nigerian, the people, the rich people, the investors do not import goods. They produce, they manufacture. Probably in Ghana and other African countries, the investors and the rich people import goods. So when you ban importation of local rice, it's going to affect them. Governments, on the other hand, are looking at duties they are going to get when you import goods into the country. But what is the future if we cannot dream big? If we cannot say that let's only allow 5% of foreign rice, and let pushes our local farmers to produce rice so that we can consume ourselves. It's going to create a lot of jobs. It's going to liberate these farmers from poverty. It's going to actually solve the migration problem into the capital town of Ghana, so that everywhere you are, there are enough farming activity going on, not just farming, production of farm products that are ready to be consumed in the Ghanaian market. And that at the end of the day would benefit the country as a whole.
I love that. I love that. I was just having a conversation with a colleague just a couple of days ago, a few days ago, literally. I was in Finland and he's from Ethiopia. He was telling me one of the systems in which Ethiopia has implemented to create, to ensure that the Ethiopians actually are fully well involved in building the economy, especially when it comes to big businesses and businesses generally. How are they involved? How are they investing? How the legal environment and the operating environment generally in the country makes sure the Ethiopians are for the Ethiopians. Like, as you're saying, a product, if this product doesn't necessarily need to be imported, and we have a bigger market, we have a bigger number of people producing this product locally, how do we create an environment in such a way that we can be a market to our own business people? So that's a very, very interesting concept. I'm curious to see how we apply it in Tanzania though, because there's a lot of progress and conversation going on about the business environment in Tanzania. Now we have a couple of questions at the chat. So somebody said, what are the panel's thoughts on the importance in brand building on Made in Africa? And two, is there an adverse consumer perception as China experienced in 1980s, and what needs to be done? Anybody who can take on the importance of brand building made in Africa? I'm curious to see that.
Vanessa, I can take that as somebody that comes from the advertising industry and has lived in brand building for a long time. I think the single biggest mindset that we and shift that we as Africans, we've got to start believing in local. I think that what we've always done as Africans, we've always believed that everything that comes from the outside was better than what we can produce here. And I really, from a local brand perspective, we've got to support our local brands. We've got to try and help build our local brands, because that is how we're going to be able to export. And going a little bit back to also diversification is important as well, because it's associated with economic growth and reduced volatility, in countries. So there's so many from a brand perspective, and even I think in Rwanda, they've got Buy Rwanda. In South Africa, they've also got, Buy South Africa. So I think if we can, as the Africa continent, I always call it, one Africa, one voice is our mantra. If we as a collective can support each other, and as Justice was saying, increase that intra-Africa trade. And when we increase that intra-Africa trade, we can, then export, globally to everybody else. But we have to focus on that intra-Africa trade. I'll give you a quick example. We had our 5th annual Africa Shared Value Leadership Summit in Johannesburg a month ago. We could not, talking about what Justice was saying about free movement, we couldn't get, a visa for somebody from Rwanda to come to South Africa. I mean, how ridiculous is that? How ridiculous is that? I know. And then one of our entrepreneurs in Nigeria, because we got all of these entrepreneurs to come to Johannesburg to talk about the experiences. One of the ones in Nigeria, it was easier for her to get a visa to go to the USA than what it was to actually come down to South Africa. And those are the things. Those are the barriers that is going to hold us back. And so true what Justice was saying. If we do not get that right. It's just going to be another piece of paper that is institutionalized by the Africa Union, by the AfCFTA, and all of these different, institutions, and our SMEs, our startups, our entrepreneurs, the people that really need to benefit, those 30 million people that we can lift out of extreme poverty, and the other 68 million where we can raise their income, they're not going to see any of it. We really, really have to look at that. But just to answer the question again in the chat, we need to believe in local. And I think that it's really, really good because we've seen it in certain countries, I think specifically with some Rwanda products. And now I'm talking fashion, because this is something from Rwanda, if you can see.
It looks
wow.
like a Ghanaian fabric, though.
Yeah, I know. So
now you see, this is why I'm very curious to see how we work together, because I'm telling you, man, they're gonna be, because I see how it happens between Kenya and Tanzania, the Twitter war, of them stealing our artists and stealing our Kilimanjaro. So I'm just curious to see how this is gonna.
We need to support each other. I don't think we've got to forget about the competition, Vanessa and Justice and Guilermo. That's what I want to say. It's not about competition.
It's fun. I hear you. Guillermo, I love to hear your thoughts though on this building a Made in Africa brand, and how does markets like Indonesia work when it comes to support local and these kind of systems?
Yeah, I think that ASEAN specifically has shown also a strong interest in buying their own brands, their own products. But I think moving beyond physical products, I think there's a big opportunity in Africa for creating digital products that can scale throughout the continent to actually solve localized solutions. So many of the digital products, the mobile applications, the softwares that we see are made in Europe, in North America, in Asia, tailored to their own problems, their own issues, their own bottlenecks. I think that Africa first solutions or made in Africa solutions for the problems that the continent faces could be the first stage for cooperation, not only competition like we just discussed, but cooperation between these startups, these SMEs and large corporations to integrate among each other, but also among companies in other countries within Africa and other governments within Africa. And I think that could really be a solution that will be Africa first, and then later can be scaled to other regions of the world with similar weather, with similar culture, with similar exported products like Latin America, like parts of Asia. So I believe that could be a part where Africa can really show something new and unique and open that to the rest of Africa and open that to the rest of the world.
I love that. There's actually a startup called, is it Morena? I hope I'm getting this right. It's a Nigerian startup that has created a platform that makes it easy for any African startup to actually relocate or register their companies in other African startups, in other African countries. So I think that's very interesting, because I've seen the move that Dubai is making by creating an environment that is very conducive enough for SMEs and startups to actually move to Dubai and function and do business in Dubai in an easy way, that you can open a business in a much more cheaper, a much more less bureaucratic system. But also you can work from anywhere, because I think last time I checked the requirement, I think as a business resident, you're supposed to be there a minimum of 2 days in a year. And I'm like, deal, if I can open a business in a country where I can gain investment, cash flow is there, and I don't necessarily need to be there all the time. I can still be with my family. I just need to be there two days in a year. hey, who wouldn't? So I think definitely I agree with all of you that we definitely, as a country and then as a continent, we need to sit first in countries, discuss how do we create an environment that can favor the growth of our own local businesses. And then as a continent, how do we work together now that these businesses that we're growing and these businesses that we're creating an environment in which they can grow can work together to complement the growth of the continent in general. Then the continent, how does the continent work with the rest of the world? Because if by then we could have the richest man on earth walking in Africa, Mansa Musa, I don't see why we can't have that now while we actually have access to even much more easy tools like technologies that can actually facilitate that same particular level of growth and scalability. So there's another question here. This is getting interesting, and then our time is also, oh Lord. Anyway, so there's another question here. Who is really responsible in cementing the intertrade and the relationship between countries? Is the AU really playing its role, or else does the individual African countries buy this idea of common market and removing market barriers? This question I'm going to ask you, Justin, Justice, or any other panel, if you have, you would love to respond to this. And then the other question is, how has the COVID affected the entrepreneurship scene in Africa, and how resilient is our ecosystem towards future catastrophes? Anybody who wants to take this on?
Yeah, so some time back, AU actually enacted what we call the African Economic Community, and one of the purposes is to foster integration. And definitely AU is responsible for intra-country or whatever within the African continent. They are the only vehicles we can use effectively. If it is not happening, then countries now begin to establish strategic alliance or partnership among themselves within trade deals and stuff. But let me ask you a question. I mean, which continent is the continent with the richest natural resources or the largest resources? It's Africa.
Africa. Yeah.
But look at the trade, export, and importation of products. You see, the African probably will come last when it comes to production and will come first when it comes to consumption, right? So there's a problem. I mean, we've traveled so many years here. We have the largest natural resources, and industrialization is poor. Africa is noted for arable lands. It means we have strength in agriculture. It means when it comes to food security, the world can boast itself on Africa, but Africa is not doing enough. Africa is not doing enough in terms of raw material processing, production. We are far behind. So I think the African Union leaders have a lot to do. We need leaders who can demonstrate to us, not only in document or not only in meetings, but in reality. And that's what we are all looking for. Look at the job security issues. They are all because of our inability to take advantage of what we have as an African, right? If you come to Ghana or you go to other African countries, you'll be amazed what we import in and what we consume in terms of tomatoes. What we can easily produce in Africa, we are importing them. That's my problem. Okay, so now when you look at the euro, is a common currency that is used in the Eurozone, right? But the euro currency has become one of the top 3 currencies that we can peg our currency to. So it is also important or imperative that African leaders should not only say they want to enact or they want to come out with a common currency. There should be a conscious effort that we need an echo. The introduction of a common currency does not eliminate your country currency. You can still have your currency and still trade with a common currency. what common currency does is it eliminates a lot of unnecessary costs, because if I'm supposed to trade, if I'm supposed to import a material from US or other country, and I'm buying it in US dollars, and I'm going to use it in Ghana and sell my product in Ghana cedis. Imagine the gap in terms of currency differences. So common currencies are great. You know, Hong Kong has actually pegged their currency to the US dollar since 1983. It shows you how common currencies are. So I would love to see the Ghana cedi. I would love to see the Nigerian currency. I would love to see Tanzanian's currency. I would love to see everybody's African country's currency. But I would also love to see a common currency we trade among ourselves. And that will also play a major part when it comes to this. My last, with the question that you asked, African leaders might take a lot of time to do a lot of things. Probably we are slow in implementing good ideas. But then it doesn't mean that countries cannot foster integration deals or trade deals among themselves for the benefit of their businesses, their SMEs, and their startups. So I would love to see my country foster integration deals strategically to take advantage of the AfCFTA, so that, we will change the indicators that we see when it comes to importation and exportation. And lastly, I would love to see legal framework like the Ghana Startup Act, encapsulating trade policies or strategies that will enable and empower startups to take advantage of this big market we're going to see.
I love that. I love that. Tiekie, do you think you can take on how, given that you're working closely with SMEs, how has COVID really affected the entrepreneurship scene in Africa? Maybe the case of South Africa in this case, and how resilient is the South African ecosystem towards future catastrophes?
I just want to quickly say to Justice, you've got my vote for that common currency. I'm right behind you, if we can work together. So how has COVID affected, our SMEs? I guess when you look at it, when we look at it in a positive and a negative way. So yes, there has been some casualties, definitely, without a doubt, because the first thing that happened with our young entrepreneurs is that they lost contracts. The big businesses that they possibly had contracts with, withdrew those contracts, or they withdrew those orders. So our young businesses really, really suffered. However, out of COVID, there's also, for me, what I see from a young perspective, because really, believe me, I believe that Africa is where we're building the global future, because we are the youngest continent. We've got the youngest population. So this is where we're growing it. And from, as Guilermo said as well, is from a digital and a technical perspective. If you look at Africa and the innovation that comes out of Africa from a technical perspective, it is really amazing. So what COVID did then is it also created almost like a new platform for young entrepreneurs that wanted to start something new from a digital perspective. Because as Africa, we don't have the infrastructure. And yes, Justice and Guilermo, we have to create the infrastructure in order for the AfCFTA to be successful as well, because the transport cost from an AfCFTA perspective is it's astronomical in Africa, and the thing is, we mostly use road transport, and the thing is, the roads really, as we know in Africa, is really, really, really not great. But as Africans, we have to leapfrog over that problem we have with infrastructure, and we have to leapfrog into that digital world, which we have to a certain extent. We've got some of the best banking systems and payment systems on the Africa continent. And I'm speaking from experience. I have a daughter that lives in Germany. And guess what? they, you know, they don't have the digital banking system that we have, because there's a mistrust there. We send money, we send pins, we can send money to anybody anywhere, in Africa. You can't do that in Germany. You can't send money electronically. You can to a certain extent, but there's very big limitations on that. So all I'm saying is that as Africans, we need to believe in ourselves. We really, really have the opportunity, we have the ability, and we to create our own narrative and really make a success of the AfCFTA. So yes, COVID has given us opportunities, but it also has caused a lot of heartache as well, Vanessa, as we know. Thank you.
True that. I love this conversation. Like, I feel like we're just getting started, although I feel like I see the time is telling us to actually get it going. But I love this conversation because it's so practical. I was just when I was in Finland, I was interacting with some colleagues, and I was giving my honest opinion on some of conversations around Africa and about Africa. Is like, in this conversation, we're like from Davos' point of view, and I'm using Davos as a reference to say they were so high level, but that they kind of miss the practicality of the environment within Africa as a continent and within each African countries. And I love that this conversation is really just diving deep within each environment and systems that are so practical, that can actually help us maybe not just move forward, but leapfrog, as Tiekie said. I wanted to have one more question. I love justice that you've touched an issue about currency. There was an example of one of the investor who was talking about they invested in a very futuristic, promising startup in Zambia, but they invested in USD, and then there was inflation in Zambia, and in the end of the day, the investor didn't even see the value of the money anymore. So yeah, currency is definitely something that is very sensitive. I just wanted us to sort of give it an overview on what are our last comments, and then do we think what is the role that we see of technology, particularly any kind of technology, whether it's going to be blockchain when it comes to the trading part of things, importation and exportation, or it's whatever technology playing the role in accelerating the success of AfCFTA, and then we all just give our last takes before we are booted out of the conversation. So maybe Guillermo, we can start with you.
Sure. Thank you. So related to the last part of the question, which technology, I think that definitely because of mobile adoption in Africa, Africa is mainly a mobile first continent. I think that a lot of solutions for everyday life via mobile applications, mobile applications that don't require very high technical specification for mobile devices. Those we will see the most rapid implementation and the most rapid adoption by users. Like Tiekie was mentioning, payments, but we see things beyond that. Even beyond traditional mobile and what we regard as software applications, we see a lot of breakthrough companies in the plant-based sector coming from South Africa. We see a lot of companies coming from logistics, efficiency coming from Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Ghana. We see companies related to manufacturing of clothes, improvement coming from Kenya. So I think we need to look at this holistically and see how different African countries can complement each other in their own value chains. And then that's how they can increase not only cooperation, but the benefit of everyone taking the role in exporting, whether it's goods or services.
I think if I can just close off by adding to what you were saying, and Vanessa, what I was saying earlier on, is that we have the capability in Africa to, as I said earlier on, to leapfrog with technology into the future. Because and to a certain extent we're doing it already, as you've just mentioned, Guilermo, with the payment system. I think just from an Africa continental free trade area, they are already working on a one payment system that will be able to cross borders, cross currencies, from that perspective. So to make it easier for everybody to trade across borders. And I think to make for me, I'm a great believer in the power of the collective. So we as Africans need to work together to make a success of the Africa continental free trade area. And I think it was Chris who asked, whose responsibility is it? And Justice was saying it's the Africa Union who actually looks after it, but it is all of our responsibility. We need to take that first step. We need to engage. If my country or if the policies in my country isn't, favorable to me as an entrepreneur, we need to say something. We need to speak up. We need to raise our voices, and let the authorities see that we have to make changes in order to make it easier for our entrepreneurs and our SMEs. So thank you, Vanessa. This has been really great. And I would love to be able to talk the whole day about this because it's a very important subject.
Me too.
Okay, so what I would say last is that I love agriculture. So Sarah, I like what you're doing and I hope to see you in a bigger space. I'm talking to Sarah. I can't pronounce the first one, so let me use the Sarah. And then Barnard Tiekie. Barnard Tiekie is also inspiring to read or to listen to. I really learn a lot. Nessa is full of energy and it makes the chat more lively. So technology, right? I want to see technology, I see as an enhancer in whatever we do. So I would love us to invest technology in the area of production to enhance our productivity. I also love to see investment in technology in the area of transactions to enhance our transactional arrangement. I would love to see that in our transit system because the transport system is actually the vehicle that drives economy. So these technology, if well tailored and well invested in the right areas or in the right infrastructure, Africa is going to reap the stuff. So competition is good. And Nessa talks about competition. Competition is the only way within trade zone where quality can be assured. If there is no competition, there is no quality. So the African free trade actually pushes a lot of competition among ourselves. And that is what I'm saying. Every country needs to strategize. Once it is enacted, it is yours to fail, yours to succeed. So it is going to be a competition among African countries and among SMEs. The country that position itself very well wins, or the country that is able to align itself strategically is going to do a lot of businesses among the African country, and it's good. It's going to take a long journey, but I believe that when the right thing is done, we're going to reap the benefit of it, and we can compete the Eurozone when it comes to product with respect to exportation and importation. I'm humbled to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much. Oh, I'm joining all of you. I really wish to have this conversation the whole day because it is something that is very important for all of us to actually get into the table and figure out what needs to be done to move forward. So there's a lot that has been talked about systems, internal systems within countries, within the continent, the investment side of things that needs to be done, the technology side of things. But either way, in the end of the day, we're all agreeing that it's very important to create an environment in which SMEs and startups can thrive within their local markets, but also be able to expand within Africa and other global regions. I love this conversation. I love the panel. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I hope there were no other questions, especially on Facebook. I know this conversation is going to keep on going as people watch the conversation even later on. So I hope, if it's fine, we can even, if we get any other questions, we can tag you guys on LinkedIn or anywhere where you can respond.